It's Lessons for Life coming to you live on a Saturday night, and I greet you with the shocking news that Netflix drama series African Queens has sparked controversy in Egypt for depicting Queen Cleopatra the Eighth as a black African. I didn't know that there was more than one Cleopatra, Queen Cleopatra the Eighth. The lawyer who filed the complaint claims the show violates media laws and aims to erase the Egyptian identity. Right. Are Egyptians not African? Egypt's in Africa, isn't it? Are any Egyptians black? I'm sure some of them are. Why do Egyptians have an objection to Cleopatra being portrayed as a black African? Here's one of the other earlier depictions of Cleopatra. So in Western media, she's usually been shown as a white European woman. And a lot of people are saying, well, Cleopatra was actually Greek or Macedonian, which was pretty much the same thing back then. The Ptolemy, is it the Ptolemy Greek civilization in Egypt? But are Greeks even white? Are Greek people white people? If you look at the Greek Cypriots all the way down there at the southeastern coast of the Mediterranean, they don't look that white to me. Technically, they might be culturally European, and the word Europe is itself a Greek word, but are you really a European if you're living geographically in the Middle East? Won't there be some African and Asian admixture in your DNA over the years? Wouldn't Cleopatra, the first, the second, or the seventh, have had some kind of African heritage if you've lived there for long enough? And there are actually still Egyptian Greeks around today, very, very small community of Greek speaking people who've lived in Egypt for centuries, since the time of the Greek civilization there. And they might look a little bit more European than the other Egyptians around them, but I don't think they're white in the way that we understand what white means. Dardasha is saying she'd have nice tan. Yes, absolutely. And which one of these depictions of Cleopatra do we think looks the most accurate? You can tell me via coordinates. You go along the bottom and then up the stairs. These are various depictions of Cleopatra over the years. And a while ago, there was another controversy with Cleopatra when Gal Gadot was cast as Cleopatra. Gal Gadot is, of course, an Israeli actress of Ashkenazi Jewish origin, so the Jews from Eastern Europe. But obviously, her heritage would go back to the Middle East a long, long time ago. Was she the right cast for Cleopatra? Then we were accusing Hollywood of whitewashing Cleopatra. Is this blackwashing? And was Cleopatra something in the middle? Was she a Middle Easterner? Even if we're going to say that she was Greek, I don't think that Greek necessarily means European or white in our modern understanding of the concept. I mean, how long have we been talking about white people, or this concept of the white race? Surely that is something that didn't appear until the 19th, 20th century. When did we first start talking about white people? And why were the Irish immigrants that first arrived in America not considered white? Why were they white but not white enough? And how come Middle Eastern people that first arrived in America from places like Syria and Lebanon were considered white? How come they were white enough? Dadash is saying, I think the story is what matters the most, not the color. Yeah, maybe, unless the story or the color is an integral part of the story. I mean, you couldn't have a white man playing Martin Luther King, I don't think. But was Cleopatra's race anything to do with her story or what happened to her? I don't think it was an important factor. But why do some, not all, but some Africans have such a revulsion against being described as black? I'm talking about the North Africans, where Black Africa meets North Africa. People kick up a fuss if you call them black. And did you know that in that sort of corner of Africa, not far from Egypt, let's go to Somalia in 1935, we see some rural folk being indoctrinated with Nazi ideology. The goal was to create a rural class who would eventually infiltrate urban centers over the generations with Nazi ideology. So we know that Italy was in that part of Africa at the time, and Mussolini wanted to conquer Abyssinia, as they called it, which I think relates to modern day sort of Somalia, Somaliland, that sort of area. And did they indoctrinate the locals with the Nazi ideology? Because I know El Duce, Mussolini, was hand in hand with Hitler at the time. Were they telling these Africans that they're somehow better than other Africans, that they're somehow not as black as other Africans? This is how imperialism works. This is how divide and conquer works. This is how the Belgians in what became Rwanda were telling the Tutsis that they were superior to the Hutus, because the Catholic Church was preaching the doctrine, the Hamitic doctrine, that says some of the tribes were descended from Noah and Noah's son Ham, and some were not. Here's another shot of Somalia, Nazi delegation in Italy. So Somalian Nazis came for a meeting in Italy. Nazi ideology has had a long entrenched position in Somalia during the reign of Mussolini. There you go. An ideology that was erased but is coming back. Are there really white supremacists in the Horn of Africa? Are there Somalians who believe that they are part of the superior race? Because if you get the old history books out and you look at where they term the Caucasian race to originate from and pervades, it's across North Africa and North Asia, right up into India, and of course the Caucasus Mountains. But did the so-called Caucasian race really originate from the Caucasian Mountains? I think that's been disproven. I think it was actually because are they called anthropologists that came up with it thought that the skulls from the Caucasus Mountain region, Chechnya, Dagestan, those sort of areas, were the most attractive. So they wanted to term the European and surrounding areas race as the Caucasian race. And the Somalian people, if you believe this racial theory that's been pretty much debunked now, Somalian people are considered to be part of the Caucasian race, and quite clearly a lot of them consider themselves part of it. And the Nazis, as racist as they were, did consider people of the Horn of Africa as part of the Aryan race. It wasn't just as simple as blonde hair and blue eyes, as we're often led to believe. Don't forget, Japan, Far Eastern Asian Japan, were declared to be Aryans when they entered the war on the side of Hitler. So the whole Aryan purity, Aryan race thing does extend further than just the Nordic nations of Northern Europe. And here's a modern day Nazi from Somalia, I'm sorry to say. The current leader of the new Somali Nazi Youth League is the former mayor of Mogadishu. And there's his name. Can you believe that? Can you believe that there are people in Africa walking around with red armbands claiming to be Nazis, when we know that the Nazis in Europe, the neo-Nazis in Europe, you would think would want nothing to do with them. But this is the thing about racism. People are always looking for a way to punch down. Are the colonized nations of Africa being turned against each other? And do Somalians who suffered under colonialism of Italy and also colonialism from Britain? I know that Britain ruled what's known as Somaliland, and Italy were in the other parts of Somalia. Do the Somalians feel better or want to make themselves feel better by being less African or more white than their other fellow Africans? And is it this attitude that makes some Egyptians not want to be considered black? One of the presidents of Egypt was Anwar Sadat, who was assassinated in the early 1980s, I think, maybe 1982. And he was an Egyptian whose mother was, I believe, from Sudan. So a mixed heritage, you could say. When they made a film about Anwar Sadat, he was played by an African American, and Anwar Sadat got very upset by that and came out and complained and said, "Look, I'm not white, but I'm also not black." And there is a racist attitude in Egypt. I believe that the colloquial word for black people out there, or the racial slur, is actually abid, which means slave. Black people are referred to as slaves, which it makes us uneasy to think about that. And sometimes when the West is going through this reckoning and coming to terms with its racist past, we can actually forget that there is racism in other societies. Now, some people will say that that stems from white supremacy, and that Egyptians, Arab Egyptians, are only racist towards black Egyptians or dark-skinned Egyptians because they've felt inferior to the white colonialists that went there. Even something like the caste system in India, and Hitler was very interested in India and the caste system, and he even stole the swastika symbol. It's an ancient Hindu symbol, but something like the caste system that puts Dalits at the bottom of the pecking order out there, and these people, the low class people, the workers, tend to be of a darker skin. And the richer people, the north of India is richer than the south, and the richer people, the upper class people in India, tend to be of a lighter skin. And are they descended from the Aryans who came from places like Iran? Modern day Iran takes its name from the Aryans who descended down into the Indian subcontinent and subdued the Dravidian people, the native indigenous inhabitants of India, who do have something of an African heritage to them, I believe, if DNA tests have been done correctly. These early inhabitants of India, South India, and Sri Lanka would have drifted off from East Africa and made their way to the subcontinent. And these Aryan invaders, lighter skinned but still Asian people, made their way and dominated the native inhabitants and continue to dominate centuries, millennia later. But ingrained is that idea that a lighter skin makes you superior. You are more affluent. Hence, even in the Indian community over here, people are lightening their skin with various products that are no doubt very, very bad for you. But it's anything for the look, for a more European or a lighter skinned look. So does this cut both ways? I know there are people on one side of this argument who come up with memes like this and say if Disney made a movie about Greta Thunberg, she would be portrayed as black. Is this because we're having a reckoning and we are coming to terms with our racist past and trying to make up for it? Are we doing everything we can now to make things right? And that's why occasionally you might see kings and queens and characters from the past who we know would have probably been white Europeans portrayed as black people, or rather portrayed by black actors and actresses. I'm thinking specifically about Anne Boleyn, one of the wives of King Henry VIII. I know she was recently portrayed by a black actress, and we can be very selective. Some people get very annoyed about this, but not so much about this. Does it matter? Should it be more about telling the story, as Dardasha said, rather than getting it absolutely word for word, letter for letter correct? It doesn't matter if they're a different height. Does it matter if they're a different shade of skin color? By the way, if anyone wants to jump on, the link is in the description. Click on it and you'll get through to chat to me. Anything you want to say. We do very much believe in freedom of speech on here. I would just ask that you deliver whatever message you have with respect. And anyone who's shy, feel free to just leave your opinions in the comments. Dardash is saying, do you think there will come a time where colours aren't a problem anymore? Well, a lot of people that believe in the melting pot and this idea that eventually we're all going to end up being mixed race, they've actually said that we'll end up looking like what the ancient Egyptians looked like, because they were somewhere in the middle. I'm going to let Harry join us. I wonder which Harry it is. Harry, are you there? Can you hear me, Harry?
Yes, yeah. I think it sounded okay.
Yeah. I can hear you. That's fantastic.
Great.
You can be audio only. It's not a problem. What do you make of all this?
Are you reminding me quite a lot right now of the final chapters of Akala's book? I don't know if you've checked that
Oh
out.
wow! So
Natives. Yeah.
Akala, the great British poet, who I think is of a Scottish and Nigerian back. What's his background? Akala.
He's Jamaican
Is he
and
Jamaican?
Scottish.
Okay,
Jamaican and
part
Scottish.
Jamaican, part Scottish, and
Yeah.
grew up obviously as a black man in the UK, and that's very prominent in his poetry. What was his book about?
Here we go. Let's get the cam on.
Oh, there you go.
I
Hello,
get to see
Harry.
you. There we go. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so this was in 2018. It was mostly about how his mother raised him for the most part. They both had really bad childhoods, his parents.
Okay.
And he said that although his mom tried to show as much sympathy as possible towards the whole race thing that he was going through, she could never really get it. That was one of the lines that really stuck with me.
So he's of a mixed background, and his mum is the white parent, and she could never get it. He's saying,
yeah,
she couldn't understand his life experience.
In a way, yes. She was there for him. She really educated him. They were very high achievers. Miss Dynamite.
That's right. That's his sister, isn't it? Miss Dynamite.
Yeah, the actress. The other actress is his other sister's a stunt woman. They're all very, very high achievers.
What a talented family.
It's because it's basically because of her for the most part. I would say she's fantastic. But yeah, he kind of always felt a little bit of resentment. I think it's strange, really. It's interesting to read because it's the things that he went through. Have the black side and the white side. He felt a lot more black, and went on to learn about how the actual the concept of racism is invented by academics. It's invented by academics, and it's put down onto the ordinary people who are who adopt it, who become National Front and all the rest, and they are the ones who adopt it essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think that he felt black because he grew up in a white majority country, and say if he'd grown up in Jamaica, for example, would he have been regarded as whiter than although probably Jamaica's a bad example because Jamaica is a melting pot, but let's say in a densely black populated country, I can't think of an example, if he was the only half white person in that community, would he have gone more to his white side?
No.
And why is that?
He talks about the main colonizers. We have Brazil, we have Spain to a certain extent, but not Africa. They were more like Philippines and things. France and Belgium, they were sort of the main ones in the race for Africa. But he went to Brazil one time, and he didn't learn any of the language. He said, "Yeah, that was my bad," and yeah, he was pulled out of a car and had a gun pointed at him. And and he wasn't saying any, and they wanted him to lift up his T-shirt to show he didn't have any guns or like tattoos of affiliation, and he didn't understand what they were saying, and they just thought he's being uncompliant. He said he felt like he was sure he was about 10 seconds from being shot on the spot, and in a majority black country, So yeah, that was his main point. In the majority of ex-colonized countries, this can be the case. Even in South Africa, as well as we see it. And
you're in South Africa as we speak. Am I correct?
No, I'm in Northwest London at the moment.
Oh, you're Northwest. Okay, sorry. I thought, but you got connections there. You spent time there, right?
Yeah, family.
Okay,
family there.
What do you make of Dricus? I forget his second name. The UFC fighter. He was saying that he's more African than Adesanya because he lives and trains in South Africa, And Israel Adesanya, the minute he made a bit of money, upped and left and went to New Zealand. But this Dricus is a white South African, and Adesanya has come back and kind of questioned his Africanness because of his race. I mean, how many centuries do you have to spend in Africa before you become African?
So Adesanya is
he is a black Nigerian UFC fighter who went to live in and train in New Zealand. Dricus Plessis, I think, Duplessis. Dricus Duplessis is a white South African athlete who lives and trains in South Africa and is proud of being an African. And he says, when I win the title, I'll be the real first African UFC champion because I'm actually African.
Okay. This Dricus, the other fella, he's already won the title previously.
Yeah, he's already the champion. He's got the belt. But he's. I mean, it's kind of like having a pop at someone, isn't it? Questioning their identity. We know that there was a bit of racial banter between Muhammad Ali and Joe Fraser. I mean, Muhammad Ali said things to Joe Fraser that I certainly wouldn't want to repeat. And who did he call an Uncle Tom? I'm trying to. Was that? He called Joe Fraser an Uncle Tom. I think he said the same thing about Floyd Patterson, possibly. But that fighting talk is always to rile people up, I suppose.
He does mention Bruno. He mentions Bruno in this book. He says he remembers his after he fought Oliver McCall and won the title.
Yes.
And he says he was just like almost in the verge of tears. I'm not an Uncle Tom. I'm not an Uncle Tom, because everybody would say that about him.
Frank Bruno was saying that.
Yeah, he was saying that. I never saw that interview, but Akala recounted it.
Bruno, very proudly British, coming out to the ring in the Union Jack, and I'm reminded of Linford Christie, another great British athlete that I think some of the black community questioned, like why are you draping yourself in the Union flag? But I think we've come so far now, and we're so used to seeing black Brits being proud of the fact that they're British, there wouldn't really be an issue now. But yeah, in Bruno's era, that's a question. And another on that topic, I think it seems to me that the black people in the UK and some other minorities as well, they feel more British. They feel British rather than feeling English. So if they're from London, they'd be quick to say, I'm British rather than English. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of anybody, but that's a perception that I have. Could be wrong. Someone quickly correct me if so. Dardasha saying, I was once asked if I was the nanny for my son because he's white. Dardasha, how did you feel when that happened? Dardasha is from the Middle East, if that makes sense. Has anyone ever in South Africa, has your race has ever been an issue? Has it ever been a problem?
I would say no.
Great.
But you feel very guilty about the way things still are. In terms of this fight that's about to happen, for the Nigerian fella, if he's going to the ring in the Nigerian flag, then I would say that he's definitely still representing his country. Maybe he just has the ability to have better training facilities, and he's got a camp that's really working out very well in New Zealand. So, why would he leave that? With the other fella, I think it is a bit of trash talk. Perhaps he'll wind him up and cause an upset, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you can do to get into this inside someone's head. But it is interesting, this concept of who is and who isn't African. I'm thinking of putting together. You might help me out with some ideas. The top 5 non-black African athletes, because Africa and black is always sort of, we think of Africa and we think of black people, but Africa is very diverse. And I was going to try and come up with my top 5 non-black African athletes, and Mo Salah would be up there. Who else?
Got to be Corey Sanders.
The winner of the first African heavyweight champion in boxing was a white South African.
Corey Sanders.
Good guess. No, but before him, Jerry Coetzee. Jerry Coetzee beat Michael Dokes for I think the WBA championship, and that was back where. But Corey Sanders is a good one as well. That was a big upset. Was it? I can't remember which Klitschko. It was Vladimir Klitschko, wasn't it?
It was Vladimir.
Yeah.
Some people call it an upset. Some people just call it a well-timed combination. Like Lennox always thought that he was going to do it, and that was the first time he really got.
That's it. I mean,
chance,
you've been in the ring. There's no such thing as a lucky punch. Mohamed Omar is saying Oscar Pistorius. Was doing very well until one horrible Valentine's Day when he undid all that good work. Unfortunately, Omar, get on the screen. Click the link in the description, and we'll get you on here, because Omar has spent a lot of time in South Africa as well, and as an Asian gentleman, it would be interesting to know how he got on in the Rainbow Nation. Have you in South Africa? Have you encountered many Khoisan people? Is it Khoisan? Is that the correct tribe I'm talking about?
Yeah. Khoisan, and then in just north of that is the Nama, the Griqua, and
who are the people that regard themselves as the very, very original inhabitants of South Africa?
I think you can link it back to language, and the San people.
That's who I'm thinking, not the Khoisan, the San. The San people.
The Khoi languages are, you can there's about 5 languages, like subgroups in Africa altogether.
Okay.
There's Saharan and Niger Congo. That's like the major area, all the way from the Yoruba to the Swahili to the Zulu. That covers a massive group. But then there's a small area that covering sort of the Cape Province, Namibia, and a little bit of Angola. They are considered the original people.
The original inhabitants. And it was these Bantu tribes that came down from further up in Africa at some point, and began to dominate the land.
Yes.
I've heard some of the more sort of white supremacist types using that as an argument for the white presence in Africa, saying, look, we're not any worse, and we didn't arrive that much more recently than the Bantu tribes that came and did what they did. But I mean, at least they were from the same continent. I don't know if that makes any difference, but it is interesting. And if you want to legitimize ethnic cleansing in the modern time, one easy way to do it is say, oh, well, it's always happened. Look, every country's done it. But I think the point of things like the Geneva Convention and the international law that we have now, we should have learned from the past. We should know that we shouldn't be committing these kind of things in modern times.
Yeah.
But it does go on. Still waiting for Omar to get on the screen. Omar, click the link and we'll let you in. And also Andre is possibly going to jump on. Andre is, well, he can tell you his background, but he does have African ancestry. But who doesn't? What did you make of the fact that there's Nazis in Somalia?
That's new to me, really. That's new to me. Yeah, I know about the heavy Italian presence. So
Yeah,
I suppose you can
yeah.
link it to that. As far as I know, most of my Somalian friends, they are mostly, when asked them who like their favorite country's best allies are, they'll most of them will say Turkey.
Really?
Most of them will say Turkey. Yeah.
Now, Turkey were on the same side as Italy in the First World War, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
Is that any reason, or what's the connection to Turkey?
I think it's because they a lot of support they send the way of.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of financial support. They're sort of trying to.
Well, Turkey did
grow,
financially support Ireland 170 years ago during the famine, much against the will of Queen Victoria. We've got Omar with us. He should be on the screen. Hello, Omar.
Hello.
Omar, meet Harry. When Harry met Omar.
Sir.
How do you get on in South Africa, Omar? How does your race go down in the Rainbow Nation?
Just like anywhere, I think it's not about how people see us, it's about how we feel. If we feel accepted, then it's fine. I was watching a program about a man in Japan who asks people, foreigners, how life is. And before he asks them how life is, he asks them their names and where they are from. And it was very interesting that an Asian couple were asked, where are you from? And they said, London. I thought, that's interesting. They never said, we're from London, but our parents are Asian, or they are Arab, or so and so. And
where are you really from?
Absolutely. Where are you really from, indeed?
Are you English, or are you British, or what are you? What do you identify as?
I think if people see me, they would think I'm Asian. But when I'm in Egypt or when I'm in Greece, then, or in Morocco even, things get a bit murky, and even in over in South Africa. But I don't know. I've heard so many. I mean, because naturally people ask, where are you from? Are you Moroccan? Are you Saudi Arabian? So you get all these. And I personally, I just, I say I was born in England, but I've lived a few places, and my heritage is in Asia. So I'm happy to be that. And your show reminds me of a man called Malcolm X, who said you can never force another person to put their arm around you and call you brother. So I'm not sure what the issue is, in the grand scheme of things. If people don't like you, they don't like you. Just get on with your life. Who cares what color you are?
Absolutely. But you're a proud Lutonian. We know that.
Yes, Luton for me is an amazing place. I was born in Peterborough, but I spent a lot of time in Luton. As you know, Tommy Robinson is here, and how am I racist?
Racist. Yeah.
And many others, and you have, I think, I would say you have pretty much every nationality in Luton, including Palestinians, and of course, yes, to the legend, the greatest Lutonian.
Don't ask.
Top G is there, but I don't know why there's such a negative. This is also an interesting thing, that the people living in Luton voted Luton the worst place in the country, and 50% of the people living here are white. And it's interesting, they're not ordinary white, they are chavvy. There's a lot of chavvies here, with respect.
With respect.
Yeah, and it really shocks me that they would vote for this place, because I really love Luton. I really love it. I think it's an amazing place, thriving airport. Millions use the airport on a monthly basis, and it's just shocking. And I think, is there an element of some sort of discrimination or racism? when they see Polish people here and all these different nationalities, there's something going on that they have to vote for it to be the worst place in the country. Not sure. You tell me.
But it's like kids in school. Every kid thinks their school's the worst, but they haven't seen the other ones. And even the most ghetto areas of England, I'm sure if you went to Brazil, like Akala did at one point, you'll see what poverty is really about. There's always somewhere else.
I met a person who was very successful in his business, and he delineated and deliberated, about his life and how he went. He was raised in a council estate and so on. The usual story that we hear, I think, which would be common with the minority communities. What was fascinating about his story was he said his parents always had this drive of education, and they always pushed him to educate and learn, and they told him education is everything and so on. And I thought, so what if you grew up in a council estate? The issue isn't where you grew up or what color you are. The issue is what sort of parents you had or have. And are your parents those parents who encourage you to do things, or are they parents like majority of minority communities who discourage you to do things, who live in fear because of racism? And I remember my grandmother, God rest her soul, she lived in England for 80 years, and she hardly left the house because when she first came to England, she was attacked by the skinheads, and many years later I too was a victim of the skinheads in England. So maybe she had that sort of thinking, and she just stayed where she was. And for me, it doesn't make much sense, but it is what people want to do. They're going to do what they're going to do. So what, man? Let's just get on with it.
What about Harry's point earlier on? I don't know if you caught the beginning. He said that Akala, who grew up from a mixed heritage, he said his white mum just didn't get it, couldn't relate to his experience. And you can be pro-education and all you want, but is there something for a black person growing up in England that white people would never understand?
It's interesting with black people in England.
Andre, you're on the screen, my friend. Andre, you're with us.
Oh.
And
hello. Before you get into bed.
Andre and others are listening. What? I'm glad
all right?
Yeah, we got you, Andre. Omar's just making or addressing a point about, can a white parent understand their mixed heritage child's experience growing up in the UK? So go on, Omar, and then we'll let Andre jump in on it.
I mentioned Andre, and he appeared that second.
I know.
Nice to see you, Andre. Nice to see you.
How are you doing, Hello. How you doing?
Great. What's interesting is I find personally, I don't know whether you're going to agree with this or disagree with this, and I respect your wishes either way. I find many black people are so focused and in this kind of in this manner where they want to be accepted in such a community that they almost, you think they want to be white. I don't know if that's really what they want to do, but you just get that sense that a lot of black people that I have met, I'm getting this sense that they wish they were white, and for me it just makes no sense regarding that. But the mother, she, in my opinion, white son, if you ask.
Andre, you're in.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead.
So, was that Mac who said that?
No, that's Omar. All Asians.
Sorry. The screen keeps freezing and that, so I can't see properly. Okay, so can you hear me all right?
We got you. You go for it.
Omar came up with some interesting points. And I agree with him 50%.
All right.
So it's a 50-50. you can't label all of us under that banner, but there are a majority. There is a sector of us that think like that. Okay. Now, how big that sector is, I can't comment. But we are a product of our society. We are a product of our surroundings. There are certain industries you do well at by becoming multicultural. There are societies that we are in that you have to mix. My parents are Jamaican. I am fully aware of the Jamaican heritage, the Jamaican twang, you know, the way we speak, etc., etc. But there's a time and place to behave like that. There's no point me going and I'm going with my house that I'm ready on Cleopatra and me chit chat. There's no point me going with that with the Jamaican patois if the people around me don't understand it. Do you understand?
Code switching.
Yeah. Just like there's no point me talking Urdu around people who don't understand it. There's a way you behave. I know you're not just talking about language. You're talking about the culture and the behavior. I get it. But what I'm saying is sometimes when you want to flourish and prosper, you have to adapt. And like it or not, we have to adapt to the country we live in. Now, I want to make a point because it's taken me to my grand age now to realize this. But subliminally, all ethnic BAME people are behind enemy lines when they live in Europe. I can't say so much about the people living in Italy. I can't talk too much about the people living in Germany, but I hear things. And they seem to suffer with the same things that I suffered with growing up, being chased by skinheads throughout the whole of my junior school life, being, you know, it was bad also in my secondary life, but where I lived was predominantly, well, not predominantly, but there was a high population of Caribbean people. So, I had backup, so to speak. But when I was a junior living up north, I didn't have that backup. And when I look back at my past, I also tried to become English in my approach to certain things in order to fit in.
You didn't take it as far as Chris Eubank, but do you think that's what he was doing? Because he's from the hood. People think he's a posh git or whatever. He is from the hood and spent time in New York in the slums and the rough parts as well. But he sort of compensated for it with this alter ego.
I guess he was born in Brighton also, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I know he's got links in Brighton. I think he was in South London at some point.
I'm not sure. I don't know if he was born in Brighton or not. But what I will say,
I think he was in South London at some point. Harry, do you know where Eubank was from?
Yeah, you're saying South London. I agree.
I think so.
Yeah. When
Watson
wound him up one time, his whole voice changed.
Really broke character.
Like, you prick. He went back to a Cockney, you know, or whatever.
Wow, yeah.
But he made some interesting points a few times online, and he said the English language is a great language, and it is. And whether I want the world to speak patois, whether you want the world to speak French or not, we cannot deny the fact that English is the business language of the world.
Before Chinese takes over.
Well, Chinese is the most spoken, but it isn't the business language of the world, is it?
Not yet. But
not
I'm just,
yet.
I'm wondering.
Comment. I like what you just said there. Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
But currently, we have to roll with the status quo. And the fact is, English. You know, I mean, I maybe I'm being biased, but I like the language.
Yeah, I mean, French. Only 50 years ago, French was the language that everyone spoke.
I like
but
that
now
language
it is
too.
English.
I like speaking. I like languages,
Yeah.
but I personally don't take offense to speaking English. I don't have a problem, you know. Even if Chinese takes over, I still like English. I don't have a problem with it personally. I don't take offense to the language. I take offense to European behavior on the planet, and the colonial behavior of the collective race. Do you understand? I don't have a problem with the English language.
Did you ever feel like becoming Andre X or changing your name like Malcolm and Muhammad Ali and many others that wanted to break the link to the colonial past?
It's funny you should say that, because I said, and I thought, I'm sure we've had this conversation, but if I get into politics in Africa and God was to bless me with becoming a leader, I would change my name to Andre X.
Slightly off topic, this is the current leader of the new Somali Nazi Youth League. I don't know why I put that on there now, but that's you're going into politics, are you, Andre?
He needs to look in the mirror, I think, that guy. But if I can come back, just in case Chris Eubank is watching, I would like to say that he can speak as eloquently as he wants to. I wouldn't say he's trying to be English. The guy was born in England. He has every right to be or refer to himself as English. But what I would say, he's attempting to be upper class. He's attempting, and anyone can be upper class. So I wouldn't put him in that kind of Uncle Tom category. I think he's a great man, Eubank, and he's a very respectful and decent human being.
Who would you put in an Uncle Tom category?
By the way, that Uncle Tom thing is wrong.
Okay.
Uncle Tom was a successful man.
He is the character from a book, right? Who was a subservient
by
slave.
Am I right? People out.
Yeah, but they used him. They used him as a They basically they used him in the book to humiliate him. But in actual fact, the real Uncle Tom was a freed slave who managed to make buy land and make money himself, and then free other slaves. I'm going from memory. So please, can somebody in the comments correct me if I'm wrong? But that's what I remember.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right. But going back to the point, the Uncle Tom insult is a black man who sold himself out, and I'm not saying that's not Chris Eubank. Good. No one's saying that. I love Chris Eubank, but Omar, who would you call an Uncle Tom, or is it not
Uncle Tom?
Our place to say?
You should say Uncle Stephen.
Or Uncle Stephen. Okay. Who is a sellout then? As a minority, who do you regard as a sellout? Have we got an example?
I would probably look at Jesse Jackson, that sort of side. Not so much. They said Al Sharpton was involved, selling out his people back in the day. I don't know how much of that you followed or it's true. People say Louis Farrakhan is a sellout, and I think that's the antithesis of selling out. He's standing up for his people. You have people, but what we would refer to as an Uncle Tom is someone who gives up his people. Now, when the white Europeans, Andre very eloquently mentioned regarding the Europeans and the European status and so on, it was black people, Andre, that sold other black people. There weren't enough Europeans to go and capture, perhaps you'll agree, the black people and send them over to America in the hundreds of millions. There was a lot of assistance given by the black rulers that were there.
Again, I agree with you in part, in a majority of what you just said there. But it wasn't that there wasn't. I mean, a shitload of white people is a shitload of white people. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the firearms at the time. The firearms at the time were matlock and flintlock firearms, and it meant that you could reload the gun probably once a minute or once every 2 minutes, right? So you got 2 shots per minute if you were fast, okay? Because of the athleticism of the African at the time, and the numbers of the Africans at the time, it became a problem in any warfare environment. When battle tactics started to kick in, when Napoleon, in 1800s, late 1700s into 1800s, and they had established a firm concrete base, some of the forts and castles they built, even with the flintlock and matlock rifles, it changed the dynamics of the battlefield and the dynamics of power. But then when the other firearms came in, sorry to go on about the firearms, but it's very, very important to the conquest of Africa and what you're saying. When the other firearms came into play, such as the Martini Henry, then it changed everything, because it meant that one person could shoot 5 times before reloading the firearm. So when you had a group of soldiers, 100 strong, it means they could wipe out 500 people. That changed everything. And then shooting from a defensive position, it is known in battle, it is known in military history that in military tactics that when defending a fortified
so Andre,
position.
are you saying, Andre, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, we know they had guns. We all agree they had guns and they had the capability of doing that. But are you saying half of the people did sell out or no one sold out? What are you saying?
No, I just wanted to make that point clear, because
if you're saying anything,
it's quite important as to how the firearms work. But what I'm saying to you is because of that was why initially you're saying about the numbers, the European numbers, but it wasn't so much that, it was because of the fighting. What I'm saying to you is in the beginning, they respected the African kings and they made agreements with the African kings, right, in order to supply slaves. They basically stepped in, and I agree with you on that point. They stepped in to an already thriving slave trade, which had been firmly established for at least 1,500 years, before the transatlantic European slave trade happened, because the African kings had already been trading slaves with on the Swahili coast, so on the east coast of Africa, with the Arabs. Most of the caliphates made up their armies with African troops. Do you understand? Right? A high majority of troops that helped to fight in the conquest of India, right, took their soldiers from Africa also. So what you're saying, they did. It's true. It's 100%. And it was a way of wiping out the neighboring tribe to take over land. So in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, they all done it. Isn't it
the case, Andre, that there was slavery everywhere in the world at that point? And in every society there has been slavery. The transatlantic slave trade was particularly gruesome, and it's finished now, and there's slavery in very few parts of the world now, but there is still slavery in, for example, Libya.
Well, even right here in the UK, there's slavery right here, and they had to make a case and a law against slavery. And I was horrified that slavery is still taking place, as advanced and as cosmopolitan as we are in the UK.
Slavery. Yeah.
They had to state this is a law, modern day slavery law, which is ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. And this is the world we live in. What can we say? It was going on back then, and it seems to be still going on right now.
Sorry if I strayed off a little bit with the firearms thing, but that's obviously one of my.
No, you're good. Andre, going back to Egypt, I mean, the original topic tonight was this portrayal of Cleopatra as an Egyptian, as a black, or by a black woman, and Egyptians reacting to it. In Egypt, if you call someone Abid, meaning slave, it can be a racial slur for a black person. There is anti-blackness in Egypt. Maybe, have you been to Egypt, Andre?
I haven't. It's somewhere I want to go to. I haven't had a chance.
Okay, I know, but you've been to other parts of Africa, right?
I've been to been to Morocco. Yes, I was living in Morocco.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was in Egypt not too long ago, and I think almost everyone was African. They had everyone looked kind of at least part black.
Yes.
But go and ask them. Yeah, but go and ask them if they're African and see what they tell you.
Well, that's it. They'll make
Well,
a
they're
mind
literally
like
in
they did here.
Africa.
Omar, there's Somalians out there, but are blacker than me. But they will tell you they're Arab, not African.
And
Why
here's
is
the
that,
current leader.
Andre?
I mean, we were saying, Andre, Hitler did consider Somalians as Aryan. He didn't consider them like other Africans. Is that part of the divide and conquer? Even some Somalians don't say they're black. They say we're different.
Look,
That's why Gaddafi.
when I saw your title of your show today,
Hold on, that was Harry. What were you saying there?
Yeah, Andre. I was about to say. I won't be too long with this point, but it was just that's why you got to take your hat off to Gaddafi for all his faults. He said, "Yeah, don't call me Arab. I'm African."
Yeah, when the Arabs turned their back on Gaddafi, he reached out to Africa, and he was a pan-Africanist.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, even before the Arabs turned their back against them, I think he was. To be fair, he went over to. He had very good links with the Louis Farrakhan in America.
Did he really?
Yes, he gave them $2 million on loan, which Louis Farrakhan invested in hair oil for black people or something. So there is definitely a link. Yeah, so there's definitely a very good link, an affiliation in going back to the 60s, I think it was. So he's always been proud. He referred to himself as a black man also. But mind you, even I refer to myself as a black man. That's nothing new. And I've told you repeatedly, I think on this show or any other show, that when I was in school, me and an African kid, the teacher would say, "You two black boys, come and take a seat." So I grew up thinking I'm black.
Not white, right? Black means not white.
I don't know if she would have said that to a Chinese man, to be honest, or somebody from Vietnam or something. But certainly, I was put in that category. Actually, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have said to a Chinese man, "You're a black man," or somebody from Mongolia wouldn't be black, I guess. But I was referred to as black, so I grew up thinking I'm black. And there's interviews even on YouTube. You can watch even Bangladeshi people saying, "Look, us black people," when they had their riots over in, I think they were in Tower Hamlets or wherever, they said, "Look, us black people have had enough." And they weren't black, they were Bangladeshi. But we grew up like that, and I'm happy to be black, and I'm happy I was referred to as black, and I do feel black, and I feel a stronger relationship and affinity with black people. So I'm happy to be a part of that. Not sure if it's the same way on the other side, but still I feel good with my African friends and family.
Andre, you in?
There's 3 topics I think is important for us to cover here.
Go on.
First of all, I just want to say, with what you guys have just said. First of all, I just want to say, but I consider myself to be a pragmatist. So, it might not be going down exactly down a religious foothold, but I say what I think. Okay.
Okay.
Number 1. We need to establish, based on the topic what we're talking about today, of what black is, because it is something. It is something which is affecting all of us, especially since the George Floyd incident. Okay, we need to understand what that is now. I have my own mindset on it, but I like to think I'm using common sense when I speak, and I don't just fall into categories. And what I mean by that is this: black doesn't make you an African. There are Bangladeshis out there blacker than me.
Okay.
I could argue Omar's darker. I could argue that Omar's darker than me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's not about color, is it? I mean,
we've got this thing that we attach the word black with African, and I admit probably 99% of Africans are black, but it's a color thing. So many times I go online and I hear people say Egyptians were black, Moroccans are black, The native Chinese are black. The Native Americans are black. Well, if you're going by skin color, of course you're right. But there seems to be a connotation attached to it. But people want to turn around and say they're African. It's like as soon as you say black, you think African. You need to stop. We need to stop this, because just because you're black, it doesn't make you
right, Andre. Recently,
African.
a lot of politicians had a problem defining a woman and what a woman is. Can you define a woman? I want to ask you, can you define a black person? Boom. What does it mean? Go on then.
It's your skin tone.
So we're calling Sri Lankans, Bangladeshis, Tamils, black people?
No, but Omar said something. So first of all, to dead that off, your skin tone don't make you African. All right, let me just say that. Number two,
I'm not saying African, I'm saying black. Because Akala is black, but Omar's darker skinned than him. Possibly.
Because Omar comes under black, doesn't he? Because at the end of the day,
I don't think he does. Black. He said I wouldn't describe Omar as a black person, although he said he felt black in his youth, and I understand what he means by that. But on the census, on the bit that says ethnicity, he comes under Asian British.
Yeah, but that's not Omar who's got the problem. That's not you who's got the problem. That's the census that's got the problem. Do you understand?
The census is incorrect. Okay.
Yes, it is, because at the end of the day, if you've got brown skin or you've got black skin, you're black. Unless you want to make a new...
I don't think so.
Wait a minute. Unless you want to make a category for brown people, then Omar's wrong, isn't it? He's brown.
Well, maybe we need to stop talking in terms of colours and start talking about heritage.
Julian, colorism doesn't make you a race. That's the point I'm trying to make. Colorism doesn't make you a race. We have been subliminally programmed to think that, but it's not right. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So that's the first point I wanted to make out. The second point I wanted to make out is you can call yourself whatever you want at the end of the day. All right, it's a bit strong for you to say you're black, Julian, but for somebody who's got dark skin, such as Omar, he can say that if he wants to. I mean, look, there's Africans out there would say I'm not black, and both my parents are Jamaican.
Yeah.
Right? So, do you understand? Right? Mm-hmm. There's Moroccans who look like Arabs will turn around and say they're black. Do you understand? Right? You know, I mean, we're talking about Egypt's got a problem with it. Tunisia said that black Africans are trying to take over the color status quo of Tunisia. So at the end of the day, I just think we need to establish, you're right, we need to establish what in our own heads, the common sense of colorism. And we need to call a spade a spade. If you're European, you're European. If you're African, then you're African, right? And that brings up another situation now. What is an African? Well, I believe an African is someone with Afro hair who has brown or black skin.
It's the hair.
I think the hair is very important.
God, and we're getting into we're on the verge of pushing pencils into people's hair and seeing if it sticks. But I mean,
well, so what's the problem with that? What's the problem?
Just because it conjures up images of the horrible things that went on. Maybe we shouldn't obsess over this, but that what you're describing is a phenotype, and that is essentially what race is. It's difficult to define, but easy to recognize. Yes, you're right, and that phenotype originates from sub-Saharan Africa. I know some people don't like that term. What did the people of ancient Egypt look like? I'm sure they were a mix, and some looked darker and some looked lighter.
They were. If you agree that brown and black people go under one banner, then the ancient Egyptians were half black, half Euro-Asian.
Yeah, they were in the middle. I mean, that's the Middle East, isn't it? I mean,
They look like me, probably. They look like me.
It's not a bad way to look.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, has anyone got any points that they really want to get across before we wrap it up? I know it's getting late on a Saturday night. If there's anything to say, now's the time to say it.
My point or not?
Do I understand your point? I think, I think so. Look, I think the black identity emerged as something reclaiming this word and black being beautiful. And then you had a term, I mean, in America, they had the term African American that was meant to be politically correct, but it doesn't make sense because you could be a white African or a North African African and be American. But I think the black people whom are descended from that transatlantic slave trade have had their ethnicity, their regional identity robbed from them, and all they were left with was the fact that they were black, and that's why they embraced that. You can't. It's difficult to call yourself a Mandinka, or I can't think of the other tribes that would have come if you've lost that history.
No, but I've got a problem with the tribalism. I have a problem with the tribalism. I think tribalism is what holding Africa back at the moment. Look, Julian, Omar, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, my friend.
This is Harry. This is Harry.
Hi, Harry, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, with the stuff that went on in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, supporting Zuma, when he was in prison. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a problem at the moment with this situation, and it's a repeat situation. It crops up every 10 years. We had it in the 60s, we had it in the 50s, we had it in the 40s. It's gone, and now it's time again. But this time, hopefully, we can put it to rest. In order to move forward, we have to move backwards. So when you made the point about, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to start putting pencils through people's hair, maybe we do, right? For people to understand and draw the definition of where they've come from. I don't have a problem with that. If you got a pencil, I'll put it through my hair. Oh, I ain't got none.
Crazy bald head.
No, but the point I'm trying to make is people have an issue with color. Yeah. And the whole discussion we're having here is for the same thing. Some people don't want to, it's considered a national disgrace to be associated with Black Africa. Right?
So
and notice what I said. Notice what I said there. I said Black Africa because I had to say that because again, just saying you're black doesn't make you African. So by saying Black Africa, I'm defining exactly who I'm talking about, being Central Africans. Okay? So Egypt has a problem with this being associated with, to the point that they're going to spend money now and sue Netflix. I don't know if you've discussed that. Have you discussed that?
Yeah. It's on the screen there. Right. Netflix documentary series, docudrama, sparked controversy in Egypt for depicting Queen Cleopatra as a black African. Lawyer who filed the complaint claims the show violates media laws and claims to erase Egyptian identity. I mean, Egyptian identity, thousands of years later, has been influenced by, the Arab conquest for a start, the Greek civilization that was there, and many others, I'm sure. The modern day Egyptians are not the ancient Egyptians.
Can I just cover a point about what I believe about, from what I've seen on my research about Egypt?
Yeah.
I believe in the beginning, thousands of years ago, the whole of the continent of Africa was Black Africans. Okay?
Okay.
I believe, through various reasons, the demographics changed as the years went on. And I believe when they talk about, the black queens and kings was not black, was not meaning weren't African. That's not true because Nubia did conquer Egypt at one time. And I think it was for a period of 100 to 200 years where all the kings and all the kings at that time were of Nubians. So they were black. Do you understand? As in black. Do you understand?
I'm going to bring Harry back in. Harry, we spoke about South Africa earlier on, and the San people?
The San, yes.
Who I
Yeah,
regard.
the Khoi people are like they're a lot of their language unfortunately got swallowed by Afrikaans and English,
Mm.
but
But
carry on. It's
generally,
beautiful
are
language,
they
yeah.
lighter skinned than the other Africans in that region?
When it comes to this one, wow, you've put me on heat here. You know.
Okay, well,
When it
you
comes
say
to
this one. This is obviously it obviously comes up.
and yeah, you could essentially say that, but is it because it was a mountainous region of the continent, or is it because of mixing with the people that came from Europe, the Portuguese people first, the British people, the Irish people, the Jews, like everybody that came to the so, and then it becomes political when the apartheid government came in the 40s, and they make it into a thing that's like, yeah, we're having different levels of color now, and it's a tough one to really say. I would probably say I'm not really with the San people. Not really. Maybe maybe in certain regions, but I wouldn't say that.
But
Really.
it shouldn't be used as a political point.
No. But they make it into one with like
they make it into one.
The biggest amount of people in the Cape, for example, in the Western Cape, are the light-skinned, what you would call, some of them call themselves Khoisan, the others call themselves coloured, which I'll never use this word.
Okay.
But you know, I just think it's very they kind of turn it into like a bit of a class system. Whereas now that class system has been flipped around on its head, where now the African people are right at the top, the Zulu people, the Vemba people in the case of Cyril, our current president, the white people are underneath, and then the people in the middle, the San people, they, especially in the Western Cape, they are the butter in the middle of the sandwich.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've heard their look compared to the Aboriginal people of Australia, and that they might be related. And if you question the whole out of Africa hypothesis, some people say we actually all came out of Australia. On Andre's point of the black people being the original people of Africa, aren't black people just the original people on the earth? And there are pockets of black people found in many parts of the world. On that island off the coast of India, Sentinel Island, where any visitors that arrive by boat get shot with bows and arrows, the people there look African because they've been there for millennia and they are the original people. And when Africans left Africa, some of them got lighter skinned as they went to the colder parts. Some of them began to look Indian, began to look East Asian. And in the case of Somalia, Somalia is a mix of people that left Africa briefly and came back. But Africans being the original inhabitants of all the earth would explain why they'd be the original inhabitants of Africa.
Sorry, if I may, Harry, ask you, I think you're over in the Cape, somewhere in Rondebosch.
No, he has been, but he's
okay.
He's back home.
You are South African.
South Africa, yeah. Most of the family are on that side.
So can I ask you, is there a divide? I have many South African friends that have the surname De Beer and the Boers and so on. Is there a conflict between or some sort of rivalry between white South Africans and the De Boers and the De Beers and so on, or not?
No, I wouldn't say this. Our name was Brink, and that's not Afrikaans. That's like the De Beers and the Van Jagers and all. This is Afrikaans. Brink is Dutch. Yeah, I guess there's sort of a bit of a difference between, but no big rivalry.
But is there a rivalry on the other side between black people?
I wouldn't say that either, really. No, as in you're talking like between the different language groups, you know, I don't like to use the word tribes too much either, but the different language groups within the 29 languages of the country, you mean?
Well, yes, I did mean tribes, if I'm being brutally honest. Yes, I did mean that. And then I guess anyone can speak a language. you know, we can have any sort of language, you can speak any language, but is there that thing, you know, do you notice it, do you hear of it, is there basically what I'm asking, as you said, white people are united over there irrespective of whatever wars they have had in the past and wherever they came from, they are united, there's no problems. Over the on the other side, on the black people, you said there probably is something going on there. There are languages.
In terms of the
No,
whites,
there's no
it's political.
No, in terms of there's no unity with white people. There's unity. There's respect. You know, those issues, and then on the other side there's disunity. I'm asking you, why is it that on the one side we have unity, on the other side we have disunity?
I think it was all the way through the apartheid system. They once again, it's going back to the academics. They made it so that the different what you call language groups were disunited. You know, they would really make it that way. The ANC originally had huge clashes with the Ithaca Freedom Party, who were predominantly Zulu, whereas the ANC were probably mostly Xhosa. And I think it's mostly because the way that the NP, the National Party, split the groups up, and essentially, they were very good at just splitting the groups up and making them rivals. They would have it's almost like the postcodes in Northwest, like in anywhere in London. You know, they'd have the certain townships of different. The Cape Flats was always considered Khoisan coloured, whatever you want to call it. You know, further out they had the Zulu townships, the Xhosa townships. There was that sort of element of putting everybody in a different sort of postcode. I think, you know, it's just like different levels of the way they split people up.
Pain and suffering.
When it comes to the whites, there's a lot of political rivalry. There was the NP, the National Party, versus the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party was sort of like Trump, Clinton. The Democratic Party got more votes, but it's because they didn't get as many provinces. And man, I think about what a different country would be now, you know. But yeah, there's political rivalry between the whites. I would say the way that the NP delivered things, they made it so that it disunited all of the different ethnic groups, as in terms of for example, like after 1994, there were a lot more group marriages. You know, you'd like meet a Sotho. Oh yeah, I've got a Sotho wife and I'm Zulu. I've got my wife is Tswana. You know, that's Botswana. Yeah, and I'm Zulu. There'll be a lot more of this since the end of apartheid, I would say.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it depends. It depends how it works out, but yeah, it's a good thing.
But I don't agree with tribalism. Tribalism is keeping the place separated. The Caribbean.
It depends how strong the tribalism is, isn't it? If you're gonna get married to somebody from a tribe that you've always had major rivalry with, it's gonna cause chaos, I assume, because they don't just marry a person; they marry families.
No, but what's buying into the rivalry? It's the separation, right, and the tribal honor that is keeping the things apart. When you intermix, you know, we were all from different tribes when we went to the Caribbean as slaves. But what's happening is after 400 years of intermixing, that's all gone. Do you understand? And it's produced some good things. You know, athleticism, etc., etc. It's produced some good things. Sometimes it's not good to separate. I mean, in Africa at the moment, I know in Kenya and places like this, they have this tribalism issue. You know, and they will keep the other tribes down and look after their own tribe. It's not helping the situation. Sometimes unity is the best way forward. So I personally don't agree with tribalism. I think tribalism is one of the biggest problems for Africa at the moment, personally.
Mhm.
In fact, I could argue it's the number one problem for Africa.
Yeah. Well said.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great honor to speak to you, gentlemen, and I look forward to being on another show with you very soon and speaking about topics that are relevant in the news and beyond. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Omar.
Thank you. Good night.
See you.
Yeah. Yeah. Andre, what do you think about this one? 19 Keys. I was listening to him the other day. I don't know if you've heard of him. Saw him at there was an event at the Royal Albert Hall. He was there briefly in November. He's got a really good channel, and he said it's an insult to call them slaves. Those who went to the Americas, they weren't slaves. They were astrologers. They were medics. They were teachers. There were engineers. There was all this evidence of all this kind of stuff. They even been across the Atlantic already and discovered America like hundreds of years before the bullshit narrative that we're taught in high schools in the UK.
It's an insult to call anybody a slave. It's an insult to call you a slave. It's an insult to call me a slave. It's an insult to call anybody a slave. That point I agree with. And were they highly regarded people from the particular tribe that they were taken from? Of course they was. You know, it was one of the ways that they kept Africa under control. They took away the academics and you got rid of them basically, so that they could instill who they wanted to be instilled into the tribe, who was more passive, who was more pacified. Do you understand? And when it got to a stage where the empire didn't have enough manpower to control Africa, they brought the Indians in to take power. Hence the reason why, as Idi Amin said, and it goes on in Kenya and Tanzania now. But let's use Uganda for an example. There was a time when 98% of Uganda's wealth was owned by 2% of the population. That 2% was Indian. Hence the reason why Idi Amin kicked them out. All right. So, and that was because there was a brain drain situation, and that brain drain is affecting Africa's growth even today. So, I agree with him. I mean, I haven't heard all what he said, but the points you just mentioned, I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel Jules is trying to push me to say something at the moment, because I've got a topic. I've got some research I looked into with regards to the out of Africa theory. I don't agree with the general consensus of what's been said. I don't agree with the out of Africa story entirely. Okay.
Why
not? But I don't think we've got enough time to talk about it on here at the moment, to be honest. I think
that's all right. We've only been going for an hour and a half. We're just getting warmed up. I was going to wrap the show up, but because I've got you two on the screen, I mean, no pressure. I just think you've probably got a lot to share, but we can always come back to it. Sean Drew mentioned Last King of Scotland. That was the film about Idi Amin with Ewan McGregor, touching on what you said there. I need to give that a look.
Yeah. So go on, Harry. Sorry, mate.
The initial theory was you was talking about the original bones found. 200,000 years African.
Mitochondrial Eve, is that?
Yeah.
Was found where? Found where?
I believe an area of the Eastern Cape. I can't exactly remember the exact location.
Okay. So,
and
I thought she was from Ethiopia. The Eve.
Lucy.
Yeah. No, you're right. Lucy.
Yeah,
Lucy
the European bones.
Dinquinesh.
The European bones only going back to 6,000 years.
Okay.
So it's and they think it's some sort of alien symbiote.
Now you're talking.
That created the Caucasian. Yeah.
Andre, Harry's
am
on
I
your
saying-
page.
Am I? It is Harry, isn't it?
It's Harry.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I got your name right.
hmm
So I'll just touch on it briefly. I'm not going to go into full detail because I'll be here for another
Easy.
6 weeks. Julian's kind of heard my theory already. You haven't heard it yet, I don't think, Harry, yet. I don't know if Julian's spoken to you what I believe.
No, we'll hear it.
I'm looking to make a series about it. And I reckon it will take about 100 parts to cover it. Okay?
Okay.
100 episodes to cover it. I don't believe in the out of Africa theory. I don't believe that Adam and Eve was built to be as intelligent as we are today. And what I mean by that is we think it's clever to be intelligent and to be this far advanced, but in actual fact, we're killing the planet, Harry.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could be too clever for your own good. I personally believe the way the Khoisan, the way Africans, the Amazonian Indians were living, I actually believe they were living in harmony with the planet, which is how we're supposed to be living. We're not supposed to be living in big concrete cities, etc., etc. We think we're clever, but sometimes we're too clever for our own good, like I said. I believe that the original man was Adam and Eve, and I believe that the original man lived in Eden, and I believe Eden is the entire African continent. I don't believe Eden is some little sector which the academics are trying to tell us. Remember, and let's we not forget, what they're telling us, what the academics are writing and telling us, number one, is a theory based on their evidence, which they've so far found. That's number one. Number two, so far found. They have not excavated every piece of soil on the earth. Furthermore, half of the world's history is under the sea. No, 70% of the world's history is under the sea. They haven't even explored all that. I was watching David Attenborough not a while ago, right, when he went down in a submarine, and he said he's the first person to go down in that sector. So there's so much that has not been explored yet. So when we say, oh, they found Eve's bones, or we found Lucy's bones, who are you calling it Lucy? What gave you the power to name her Lucy or call her Eve or whatever? Just what you found. Have you gone to the Congo yet? Have you gone to Ghana yet and looked in the deepest jungles that have been there for over 40,000 years and dug up all of that? No, you didn't, because it's a nature reserve site for the gorilla or whatever, and you're not allowed to do that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? You're basing what you say on what you found now. And guess what? The out of Africa theory, evolution story has changed twice since I've been born. When I went to school in junior school, they were teaching us about evolution, and they showed us, we've all studied that, the chart of Homo sapien, Homo erectus, blah, 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 blah. Now they're saying that, now they're actually agreeing with what I actually have always said, that the Neanderthal is a different species to the Homo sapien. So what we've got here going on here now is the more we research, or the more they think they can tell us, is what the evidence is coming out. I believe the Sahara everywhere was as luscious as Jamaica. It was a tropic, it was just paradise on earth. And it's proven that Africa has always been a constant they always had a current, a constant climate. They was never in an ice blanket. The rest of the world was in an ice blanket. Africa wasn't. And what happened was, is the most luscious parts of Africa was the Sahara. I believe animals from all around the world was migrating to Africa, and I believe the Neanderthal, an ape-like species, followed them because coming from the cold Caucasus Mountain climate, their diet was 99% to 100% meat, and they followed the animal migration into Africa, couldn't believe their eyes, and couldn't believe the green and lusciousness that they saw. So they panicked. They started trying to herd up the animals to stop them from exploring out, so that it wouldn't be so hard to hunt them. And what they done, they started trying to preserve food, and probably was the world's first farmers, because a lot of people seem to think, especially in my race as well, we seem to think that, oh no, we were the first farmers, Africans were the first farmers. Why are you farming when everything grows wild? It doesn't actually make sense. Mass farming as we know it actually is damaging to the planet. Mass cultivation, stripping thousands of hectares of biodiversity just to grow one particular crop is not good for the planet. It's actually damaging. Hunter gathering is the best way to go about it. All right, it's the best way to live, and we don't need to farm because the elephant does it for us. Wildlife as a collective does it for us. They germinate and pollinate everything. So we just need to gather. I don't believe the original man, Homo sapien, was built to be a farmer or to build. So all of this argument about what Egyptians were this and civilizations this and all of that, I don't really follow that. I believe that the whole of North Africa, the Middle East, the Swahili coast, going all the way down, because of obviously the Bantu tribes, going all the way down into South Africa, from the east coast from the Sahara, going all the way down the east coast into South Africa, going up into the Middle East and North Africa, are the descendants of that intermixing with the Neanderthal and the African. The African didn't leave Africa. It's the Neanderthal that traveled to Africa, interbred with the African, and their children left. And it's quite interesting because when you start to study and you look into the Latin terminology, what are we called, Harry? They call us the Homo sapien, right?
All right.
No, that's wrong.
Oh.
The original African is called the Homo sapien. After the intermixing with the Neanderthal, me, you, Julian, everyone on the planet today is called Homo sapien sapien.
Okay.
And what the Homo sapien means, intelligent man.
So intelligent man.
Means intelligent man.
Right.
And I think this is you see, there's more parts to this. I'm only brushing over it. But to me, I think there is a devious twist to that somehow. Okay. But I believe the children went on and some of them went back to Europe, some of them went over to the Middle East, some of them went into the Swahili coast, Ethiopia, Eritrea, went down and traveled down. Now, what did these children look like? Well, I believe because of the climate at the time being purer than it is now, and the original gene of the African being purer, I believe a mixed race child at that time, or a mixed species child at that time, was predominantly darker than it would be with a Nubian, for example, having a child with an English person, with a European person. The child will probably come out looking like me. But I reckon those days, the child came out darker than me because of the purity of the African. That's what I believe. All right. So, and a classic example of that is if you look at places like Australia. Australians, if you look at the shape of Australia and you look at the Swahili coast, logic, I'm only saying logic, I can only base it on from what my eyes can see. It looks like that clearly broke off of Africa and spread across.
Pangea was the term for all the land when it was together. Pangea, all the land.
Exactly. So when you look at Australia, it looks like it clearly broke off from the Swahili coast. Next time you've got a map, just look at it, all right? And from what we know of what Captain Cook, etc., said, and from when he interviewed and could start to conversate with the Aborigines, not just him, other explorers and people who settled there after. They said that they were some of the first people they were the first people. These British landing there, English landing there, was the first strangers they've ever landed on the island. They'd never seen people before. So it sounds to me that when it broke off, that was it. It's been locked off to the rest of the planet ever since, until the 1700s when it was discovered by Europe. Do you understand? So I believe that the Aborigine is probably the first to second generation of the Neanderthal Homo sapien intermixing. And to me, that makes sense. And I'll tell you why it makes sense, because the scientists are trying to tell us, when, like what Julian said earlier on, when you leave a continent for so many thousands of years, you change. That's what they've been trying to tell us all these years. Well, the Aborigine is the thorn in their side, so to speak, because the Aborigine is as black as an African, but they've got Euro-Asian hair, and they're hairier than the average African.
Well, I think the Aboriginal people have a different. I mean, it's all generalization. The impression I get is they are a different shade, a different undertone than what we consider the native Africans. I don't know if you want to call it lighter or different. It's a different shade, but the Khoisan people, the original inhabitants of South Africa that Harry mentioned, resemble these Aboriginal people. And I don't know where the Neanderthals come into it, but if there's anyone in the world that doesn't have any Neanderthal DNA, we used to think it was the really native rural inhabitants of Africa who hadn't been interfered with from the outsiders. I would have thought Aboriginal Australians and people like the Khoisan might have been away from all that and not have any Neanderthal DNA.
Julian, I don't see the resemblance. How can you say the Khoisan look like the Aborigines? I don't see the Khoisan, unless it's a different type of Khoisan we're talking about. The Khoisan are lighter than me, or the same color as me. The Aborigines, the original Aborigines, right, were as dark as a Kenyan or
I don't think so.
Am I wrong with that, Harry?
I don't think so. But we'd have to speak to someone who knows.
I wouldn't say you're wrong.
I'm wrong.
No, I wouldn't say
you
you're
think
wrong.
I'm wrong.
No, he doesn't. He's with you on that one.
Because their hair is blonde, but their skin is black. The Aborigines you see on TV now, also, remember, they got abused so badly by the criminal element of Britain that moved there in the 1700s.
Tried to breed them out of existence. Yes,
they called them Australoid. They said this is the race, the Australoid race. That's what they
tried to breed them out of existence. Yeah.
So any of them who are light skinned now is a direct result of that abuse. Do you understand? That happened to them all for the last 400 years. The original ones that landed there were black with blonde hair or Euro-Asian type of black hair. Yeah, there is loads of descriptions explained for it, written down about it. So when you're saying they look like the Khoisan, I don't understand why you're saying that. What makes you say that, Julian? There must be a reason.
I'd love to get a picture on the screen now. I don't think it's going to be easy to do, but that's the impression I get of those phenotypes, and we'll have a look. We'll have a deeper look into it. I mean, Harry was saying earlier on that there's also questions about why the Khoisan are perceived as lighter skinned than their surrounding Bantu neighbours. Is it because of intermixing with strangers that arrived from Portugal and Spain and England or whatever, or is it something about them being in a mountainous region that's not as hot? You're not as near the equator. I mean, South Africa is as far from the equator as if you go the other way. I'm not sure what the latitude or the longitude is, but you could be right up at the top of North Africa, where the people are also not as black as other parts of Africa.
I don't know. For me, I just think they're the descendants of. I just think everybody along that Swahili coast going down, it is completely different to West Africans.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure.
In physical shape, in their prowess, the way they look, it's just completely different. And when they say that, because they've been subliminally trying to tell us for years that they know what I'm trying to tell you now. They've been trying to tell us academically on TV, on all these documentaries for years, but we ain't picked up on it. They always say, but they say it subliminally, right? So you don't even pick up on it. They're very smart. They say, Dr. Parbo is one of them. He's a specialist in Neanderthal studies. They turn around and they say, so when they do a whole study on Neanderthal, and then they turn around and they say, so everyone has up to 3% Neanderthal DNA outside Africa. And this has been because blah, 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 blah. So you don't even pick up when they say outside of Africa.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know that I've picked that up, and then recently I heard it change. They said actually there's Neanderthal DNA even in Africa.
Of course there is, but who are they talking about? Swahili Coast and the other 60% of Africa. Do you understand? Right? Yeah. Of course there's Neanderthal DNA there, because the place has been colonialized for the last 400 years. It's been intermixing and breeding for God knows how long. Of course there's Neanderthal DNA there. Any European that is there has got Neanderthal DNA. It's going to be bred in. I've got Neanderthal DNA. Do you understand? Right? It's of course there's going to be there. But if you're going to look into the depth, the deepest parts of and remember, all these studies we're looking at talks about Ethiopia, talks about Eritrea, talks about Sudan, talks about Morocco, talks about Kenya, talks about South Africa. They don't really do. When's the last time you've seen a study in Ghana? When's the last time you've seen a study in Nigeria? When's the last time you've seen a study in the Congo? Do you understand? It's always talking about the fluttering side, going down the East Coast, going down into where you don't even need the scientists to tell you that. You only got to look at the people to see if they look different. You said you just agreed with me. You said there's a major difference between West Africa and East Africa, without a shadow of a doubt. And guess what? You don't get no West Africans saying they're not African. But guess what? You will find Eritreans, you will find Ethiopians, you'll even find some Kenyans claiming they're not African. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? Right? They want to akin with something else. And I think that's because deep down in them, their bloodline, they already know. They already know. Yeah, even the Hausa people of Nigeria lay claim to being from tribes that come out of the Sahara, that came down from the Sahara. I think it is not just common sense. I think it's obvious that there is something going deeper than that. And, we will never know until somebody we can trust can actually start to do DNA tests. Because at the moment, we just got to listen to what they tell us on the TV. We don't really know, or what they release. We don't really know. But I think, the Khoisan people and all of that is proof that there is a lot of, that there's been a lot of interbreeding, and there's been a lot of mixing, and I don't think that's a problem. I think the mindset that comes with it is a problem. You know, what's the problem in being white? What's the problem in being black? What's the problem in being Arab? There's no problem. Julian, when's the last time me and you had a problem?
Never.
Right.
I'm not that stupid. There, guys, I'm going to wrap it up before we go on all night long. But I really appreciate you guys and Omar, who was on earlier, coming on. Harry, especially that stuff early on about our friend Akala. Yeah, that was really good. The book. We could go back.
19 Keys as well. Yeah, he's
yeah.
got some interesting bits.
Let's do it again. Going forward, we'll try and get live on a Monday, I think. But always be on the lookout if this crops up. It's been great to have you on a Saturday night.
Guys, listeners, I apologise if I ranted on a little bit about it.
It's great. It's great, Andre. I might pull some of that down for a little short clip as well. But all the best to you both. Have a pleasant evening, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care, lads. Nice one.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.